Hey guys, so I'm going to do a quick 20 minutes summary of the endocrine system. Again, long chapter, a lot to cover. So this 20-minute is supposed to be like an overview and a synopsis of the big key points. But again, it does not cover everything. So you want to make sure that you either are there in class for the main lecture or you, for this chapter at least, for chapter 13, which is unit 5. I do have a full length lecture also posted on D2. Also check that out as well. But let's get started into it. Let's get to it quick. So, first image I have up here, you can kind of see on page 253 that talks about hormones itself. If you kind of remember, right? Think about this, or if you haven't seen this yet, think about hormones as basically two classifications. You got steroid or non-steroid hormones. And really you could summarize that as steroid hormones are meaning that they've come from cholesterol type of fat, okay? And non-steroid hormones you can think of in this section showing these guys are protein based, and usually proteins always means that they're big and they have trouble getting through a cell's membrane. And that's, you always think that's why there's protein channels, and proteins have a hard time leaving the cell because we want them, keep them there. So anything protein based, meaning amino acid based, is usually larger. So big difference between steroid hormones and non-steroid hormones is that steroid hormones, because if we remember, our cell membrane is lined with phospholipids, which are a derivative of cholesterol and fat, just like steroid hormones are derivatives of cholesterol, which is kind of fat. They have a relationship. They're fine with our steroid hormones just simply passing through the plasma membrane. There's not really any gatekeeping. They're like homies, they're bros. They're cool with the steroid hormone just passing right through the membrane and doing whatever it's supposed to do in the nucleus as far as the hormone's action in that cell. But if it is a non-steroid or protein-based hormone, they such as like insulin and some other peptide hormones like antidiuretic hormone, they only way they can interact with the cells through the second messenger system. That's what's pictured here. Okay, the second messenger system, second messenger here. Okay, this is what's pictured here. Again, on your book in 253, second messenger system is saying that this protein based hormone is too big to get through the cell membrane, and the cell membrane is not going to just let it in there. So it attaches to the outside of the cell membrane. And then this process happens called the second messenger. Basically, an enzyme is released to go down and tell the nucleus, hey, this is the reaction you're supposed to do based on, we'll say, insulin or whatever. So that is the second messenger system that is activated whenever we're talking about protein-based hormones. Steroid hormones can pass straight through. Protein hormones cannot. They need a second messenger system. That's just the system name for a enzyme release system that gets the target thing to happen. So this hormone never actually gets into the cell to make the action happen. It just sends a message through the cell wall via enzymes in the cell recognizing what that is. Okay. So that's something to remember. So next we kind of want to look at kind of next page will be 253. That's where we want to look at for now. Sorry, nose. So this image is on 253. And again, as a reminder, really we're going to hone in the focus on this quick summary and more focus on the all the, as much as we can get to the endocrines themselves, the big stuff. There's some small stuff that if this is the only thing you look at, you're going to miss. So don't be the only thing you study, but this is supposed to help kind of focus your attention. So pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. If you remember, we've just learned recently with the nervous system that we've got right here. We've got our, let me make this bigger. Right here, we've got our midbrain pons and medulla. We've got our brainstem. On top of our brainstem, we have kind of the area that is the diencephalon, and the diencephalon includes the thalamus up here and the hypothalamus, which is here and then here in this screen. So off of the hypothalamus here, here, thalamus is here. Off of the hypothalamus, we have our pituitary gland, kind of like the main operator of it. Kind of puts almost all of the hormones that our body needs and uses kind of come through either the anterior So most towards the front of the body pituitary or the posterior pituitary, right? As a reminder. So this gland kind of has so much control over it. There's other names for anterior and posterior pituitary, but that's the ones I'm going to focus on is those guys. So anterior being the largest, that's our focus, but this is the anatomy portion, right? Okay. So looking at this chart is on page 255 in your book. And just again, looking at it, this is kind of, you got to think of helpful ways to help you memorize what's happening here. You're really going to have to make up your own charts. I recommend doing like a chart that has type of hormone, its action, or what organs affecting, and we'll kind of look at that in class some too. But so most of the hormones produced by the anterior pituitary are tropic hormones, okay? Most of the time because their names end in like something tropin, something tropic, all that sort of stuff. Again, this is like a big picture stuff. Not that you have to memorize necessarily all of these hormones, but you have to imagine that what's released by. Basically, you have to remember that the hypothalamus up here gets information about homeostasis needs of the body, right? Like information about, is my blood sugar low? Is it up? Is it, what am I, or well, not necessarily there, but what calcium, those sort of things. What's happening in my body, temperature regulation, those kind of things. What's happening in my body that I need to exert control over? That's the hypothalamus job. And the hypothalamus sends some hormones kind of again down this portal here so that those hormones from the hypothalamus just interact with this guy here, with the pituitary, the anterior pituitary, or the posterior. And that's kind of all the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus hormones only go here and interact with this guy. And this guy has the blood vessel interaction that goes to the rest of the body. So Lena, this kind of gives you all the big picture hormones. But again, the hormones that are released by the hypothalamus, you don't necessarily need to know all their names. Okay. You just want to know the ones that get released by the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary in relation to direction, the guiding direction of the hypothalamus. So again, this first one here, if you're looking in your book too, is your thyroid. This is your thyroid. So the first one you think of is the TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone. Again, that hormone's only job is to go to the thyroid and stimulate it to do something. Okay, right? It's kind of in the name, which is nice. So some of the other stuff over here, this line here is GH, growth hormone, stimulates fat, stimulates muscle development, kind of all over the entire body, promoting protein, fat, and carbohydrate metabolism, bone and skeletal growth, kind of like all that stuff. Okay. Leads to growing everything. And we talk about some disorders with the growth hormone too in a second. Also talking about, so also included with these glands, prolactin, which is in the name. Lactation is producing milk through the woman's breast. So prolactin is about milk production. That's prolactin. I'll do pro. Right. That one I'm not too concerned about as much, but so far TSH, growth hormone, you got to know. Okay. So a lot of these are, again, these hormones are coming from the pituitary in job to stimulate these glands to release another hormone. These glands, specifically thyroid and the adrenal glands we'll look at, they release other hormones in reaction to this chain of hormones being released by being released by the anterior pituitary, which is kind of, again, crazy and hard to keep track of, but that's why I suggest a chart. So we have ACTH here, okay, androcorticotropic hormone. Again, that tropic name, tropic is going to be stuff released by the pituitary. ACTH is targeting the adrenal glands to release something on their own, okay? Some have direct effect, but then, and then we get the luteinizing hormone, LH, and we get the follicle stimulating hormone. Okay. The key with these two is they're very similar. They're affecting sex cells right here. Pictured here's the testicles or testes of a man and the egg of a woman. So they're affecting those guys, right? And you're like, okay, well, how do I keep that in line? Well, easiest way. So LH, luteinizing hormone, also known as gonadotropin, but LH stimulates ovulation. So whenever the egg is being ovulated, the egg is being released ready for fertilization. So like the ovulation is the prime time for a woman to get pregnant. And it also is, so basically think that LH is stimulating the sex organs that kind of do their job for sex. Like the egg's job is to release estrogen and progesterone to make an egg ready. And in the man, LH is about helping the testicles or testes produce testosterone. Like think LH is producing those hormones or helping stimulate those sex glands to produce their sex hormones. Whereas follicle stimulating down here, FSH, is more about production of things, okay? Production of the sex cells that we need. So LH is about production of the hormones we need to kind of make us man and woman. FSH is about production of actual sex cells like the eggs in women and sperm in men so that we can make a baby. So that's kind of where they're closely related, but they are different. So that's how you want to kind of think of those guys. All right. So let's go back up here. So before we dive further, let's talk about some abnormalities. First of all, with the growth hormone. If you look at, again, page 255 has those growth hormones abnormalities listed. Big thing is hypersecretion or hyposecretion. If you remember, hypo is low and slow, hyper is fast or too much. Hypersecretion growth hormone can trigger like rapid skeletal growth, right? That's that giantism. Sorry, giantism is how gigantism. I can never say that one right. Giganticism. Giganticism is like, I think of not necessarily NBA players, but think of the people that hold the world record for being like the tallest man and all that stuff, right? That's giantism. A lot of times those people too have another condition that can be secondary to giganticism. That is what's called acromegaly. Okay, acromegaly is what happens whenever new cartilage kind of on new bone forms and bone builds up on places like hands, feet, face, jaw. They all tend to like enlarge, and that's why you'll see kind of a different shape to their face, and their knuckles and things like that have built up a bone. That's called acromegaly. That happens if someone keeps growing and has overproduction of growth hormone during and after puberty. But if it stops kind of after puberty, they might be really tall. They don't necessarily suffer from acromegaly, even though they have gigantism. Okay. So that's two key difference with the acromegaly and gigantism. You got to kind of distinguish. The other is slow growth hormone hyposecretion is called pituitary dwarfism. So pituitary is what they're talking about, not working as well. Dwarfism, short in stature. So basically stunted growth. This can be corrected with hormone injections, that sort of thing. Okay. That's the big one. You don't need to know all the hormones that are released by the hypothalamus, but you want to kind of have this picture in mind, right? All right. Thanks. So let's talk about, I'm going to go to the thyroid. We'll go to the adrenal glands. So adrenal glands, okay? A lot of stuff here. 258 is the adrenal glands. Big stuff, okay? Two big layers of, I'll say, of the adrenal gland. Again, adrenal glands are the top hat of the kidney, right? So you've got the adrenal cortex, the outside, and you got the adrenal medulla, the interior, okay? Adrenal medulla, again, or adrenal cortex has those three zones, those zonas, those three layers that are pictured here: zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. So big ones to kind of focus in on is these two. Zona reticularis is sex steroids, sex hormones. Okay, yeah, that kind of thing. I'm not gonna stress about that too much, but these two you're gonna have to kind of know. The outside layer is zona glomerulosa, and the middle layer is zona fasciculata, and what they secrete. Zona glomerularis is mineral corticoids. The big predominant one is aldosterone. So if you think this outside layer, aldosterone, and then you want to know what aldosterone does. So again, making a chart is what's going to help you here. But aldosterone basically promotes fluid retention by promoting the kidneys to kind of hold on to some sodium. And I've said before, salt sucks. So if I hold on to sodium, salt, fluid's going to fall. So that turns into water retention. That's what aldosterone does. Glucocorticoids released here by the zona fasciculata, those glucocorticoids are what going to be helping with several things, but a body adapt to stress is the big thing. So the glucocorticoids like cortisol. That's the big predominant one. Cortisol. That is going to help with stress response. Also, kind of helping with general breakdown of fat, storage of glucose, or releasing glucose into the blood, not storing, releasing glucose, breakdown of fat and proteins for energy. So it's dealing with stress and it's trying to break down fat, proteins, and let go of glucose for energy. That's its main goal. Okay. And it also does a little bit help with blood pressure. That's a lot of stuff cortisol does, but that's a big thing is the stress response and the breakdown of stuff for energy. Okay. If you think you need a lot of energy to deal with stress, that's how you can kind of remember cortisol is released in stress, and it does a lot of things to help me deal with that energy loss and stress. The adrenal medulla, again, the middle interior just has the secretion of the catecholamines, which again, you think your adrenaline stuff. You've heard the word adrenaline before as a hormone. Again, think of like epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay. Those are your catecholamines. They're basically for physical activity, increasing heart rate, increasing blood pressure, that sort of stuff, increasing blood flow to an area, getting ready for physical activity, that sort of stuff. Okay. But also in the stress fight or flight response, you're going to have norepinephrine release that comes from the adrenal medulla. Okay. Adrenal disorders, stuff to think about, is listed on page 259. Okay. So overproduction, hyper secretion of cortisol, again, that's usually your secreting response to stress. If there's something wrong with the adrenal gland and it's overproducing it, you're going to get Cushing syndrome. So classic symptoms, that is like that redistribution of fat, because it's breaking down fat. And when that happens, a lot of, cortisol's released. It's going to break down fat and move it other places. So people get a rounded face, moon face, could have fat distribution to their back. A buffalo hump is what they talk about, but there's redistribution of fat all across the body, and it totally messes up metabolism. So Cushing's kind of slows down metabolism, causes high blood sugar, muscle weakness, fluid buildup, stuff you don't really want, right? Okay. The other side of the adrenal disorders is hyposecretion of adrenal gland. So that usually affects hyposecretion of the mineralocorticoids from the zona fascicular, or excuse me, from the zona glomerulosa, and decrease of the glucocorticoids from the zona fasciculata in the middle here. And that is called Addison's disease whenever I have hyposecretion. So Addison's is also known as kind of like adrenal cortical insufficiency, but you think losing fluid instead of like gaining fat and fluid. In the Cushing's, you're losing fluid, you're losing electrolytes, again, muscle weakness, dehydration, weight loss. Okay. That sort of thing. Dehydration, weight loss, that is Addison's disease. Okay. So we want to keep going. Let's talk about the thyroid here. We'll skip over some of the other ones. Again, focusing big here. Thyroid is all about homeostasis. A lot of maintaining body temperature in that thing. Two principal hormones are released. Again, you have to remember that from the anterior pituitary, we're getting what are we getting from the anterior pituitary to stimulate this? The thyroid stimulating hormone comes in and stimulates the thyroid to do a job. Okay. The thyroid releases the two principal hormones, technically thyroid hormone, which you can break down. I might be able to write this. Thyroid hormone you can break down into that T3 and T4, which are made of a really important chemical, iodine. So if I lack dietary iodine, I can't make thyroid. Thyroid basically has an impact on your entire body, metabolism, like how fast your cells do stuff. Basically, how fast your cells go through proteins and go through just general your entire body. You think the thyroid has an effect over that. Okay. The other principal hormone of the thyroid gland is the calcitonin. Okay. We're about to talk about calcium regulation. Actually, we're not going to probably, yeah. So calcitonin again helps regulate calcium. Calcitonin is released in response to increasing blood pressure. So calcitonin's job is to decrease blood calcium levels. Okay. Calcitonin wants to decrease blood calcium levels, wants to store more calcium. Okay. Again, this thyroid disorders are on page 262. So you think of thyroid disorders, you got to think about what's happening. Okay. Thyroid increases metabolism when it's released. So Hypo secretion of thyroid hormone, okay, can cause some issues. There's one thing, the cretinism. If a child is born without a thyroid completely, they suffer from what's called the cretinism. So that's stunted growth, stunted sexual development, low metabolic rate, mental retardation, mental handicaps, those kind of things, like underdeveloped kind of everything for a child that's born without a thyroid is what they would suffer from, because a thyroid kind of helps us grow and produce energy and do everything in all of our cells. Increased thyroid hypersecretion means your whole body metabolism increase. So this person would have weight loss, other things. That's known as Graves' disease. Graves' disease, usually autoimmune, attacking the thyroid, and making it secrete more. But they're going to have weight loss, again, increased heart rate, nervousness, and then that weird protrusion of the eyes known as exophthalmos, which is really weird to see, but that's Graves' disease. Okay. So, and again, think about too, if I don't have enough iodine, then my thyroid might swell up to try and make more of my T3 and T4 because I don't have enough iodine. And that's called a simple goiter. It's when the thyroid swells up, not necessarily hyper secretion or hypothyroidism. It is a swelling of the thyroid in response to low amounts of iodine. That way it can't make T3 and T4. Okay. Last, we need to get the pancreas. My pancreas at? So pancreas, again, looks like this. Talk about the pancreas. The big thing with pancreas, okay, is to think about glucose regulation. It's got 3 types of cells in the pancreas that have 3 effects. The main 2 we care about, though, if you remember, or if you haven't looked at this yet, is alpha and beta cells. Alpha cells secrete what's called glucagon. And I've probably said this in class or I haven't yet, but when alpha cells secrete glucagon, to remember glucagon, you got to think glucose is gone. So glucose is gone from my bloodstream. I don't have enough glucose. Glucose is gone. So when that happens, my body releases glucagon to try and give myself more blood glucose. Okay. So basically think between meals, glucagon is going to be released to release more glucose into blood circulation. Beta cells release insulin made by the pancreas again, and that job is to pull glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells. That's the job of insulin. Okay. Stimulates the cells to absorb the insulin. It's a protein base, so it actually use that second messenger system. And delta cells or somatocin, which is kind of helps release with growth hormone. But you need to know that alpha and beta cells are the main cells of the pancreas. Okay. And then the big thing, diabetes mellitus. That's diabetes, guys. Type 1 and type 2. Talking about blood glucose regulation, think about type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is autoimmune. Okay. Usually diagnosed in childhood or early adulthood. Okay. And it's autoimmune, meaning it's insulin. It's also known as insulin dependent diabetes, means that they have to have insulin to survive. That means that for some reason, autoimmune, their bodies attack their own pancreas cells, like their beta cells, and they can't make insulin or they don't make enough insulin. And so we have to make insulin to help keep their blood sugar low. So the type 1 diabetic is autoimmune, usually diagnosed younger, and they're always going to be dependent on insulin. Type 2 diabetes can be preventable, is usually diagnosed later in life and is due to a higher level of high blood sugar and the high glucose levels over time has now worn out and made our cells resistant to insulin. Now we have to treat with medicines or treat with physical add insulin. Our body still makes insulin, but it's making enough. It's just the insulin that our body makes. Our cells are now resistant to it. So we have to kind of find a way to help bring down that blood sugar. Okay. And high blood sugar is known as hyperglycemia, low blood sugar, hypoglycemia. Those are your big things. There's a big chart on 267, and Life Lesson on 267 gives you that. Make sure that you're studying the regulation of blood glucose and you kind of understand that. Of course, we'll go over that in class. That's on page 266. And then on 263, it has calcium homeostasis. And that's, again, what's released, what's happening with that. That's a big part of that. So those 2 things plus some of the other minor stuff. But as far as big stuff, that's the kind of very fast-paced rundown of the big stuff. Okay. So Hope that's helpful. Hope that's trying to concise the stuff and see what you're supposed to focus on for this chapter. That's the big stuff you want to focus on. The other stuff is somewhat secondary. Just kind of start remembering, and again, make charts. You got to make a lot of charts. Okay, you need to make a lot of charts with the endocrine system. But I'm here to help you. We're gonna get through it. You guys got this. Okay, and y'all have a good day. Have a blessed night.